which we use to measure Nigerian policies on various issues, whether it's socioeconomic, political, developmental issues. And our commitment is to make sure that our policymakers have credible, reliable data to be able to enable them make the right policies for Nigerians and Africa as a whole. We're here today because we know, like Nelly said, that data alone does not shape national conversations. And that's why we feel this engagement with the media is important. Because you're the bridge between data and public. You're the one that can transform the numbers that we have into stories, the insights into narratives, and find these into conversations that can reach millions of citizens. In many ways, we believe that you're the custodians of public discourse, and you're the ones that actually amplify people's voices. What you put out represents what people believe Nigerians are thinking and what Nigerians are feeling or experiencing. This is why we at NOIPolls consider the media not just as partners, but as critical stakeholders, and indeed the MVPs in the ecosystem of public opinion and democratic accountability. The purpose of this media party is simple. It is to create a space where we as the data researchers and you as narrative shapers can engage meaningfully, that we can collectively reflect on the growing intersection of, intersection and tension between data and narrative, so when the data does not support the story that we want to say, how do we manage those narratives? More importantly, we also want to explore how we can work together, closely together, to ensure that the stories that we put out, which is shaping the nation, is grounded on reliable information and is a reflection of the true sentiments of Nigerians. Like Nelly said, we've been doing this for 20 years, and in 20 years of asking Nigerians their views on issues that affect them, we've learned two things. One is, you cannot assume to know what Nigerians think. No matter how long you walk the streets, you can't assume what Nigerians think unless you have found out empirically. Personally, I've been surprised by some of the findings of what Nigerians think about issues, because I thought Nigerians were leaning towards that, but when you find out that what Nigerians think is totally different from what you expect. Then the second point that we've learned is the voice of the people matter. If you have a policy that you want people to adopt, you need to listen to them, understand what their pain points are, so that reflects into whatever policy that you want to make. You can't introduce new policies to the citizens without asking them their opinion about that. And if you do have the opinion, it makes adoption of those policies, especially new policies that require change, easier to adopt. What we've also done today is that we've compiled some of our past polls into what we call the NOIPolls compendium. You have that on the file with you. And just to reflect, it's not all we've done, it's just a snippet of some of the things that we've done, trying to keep it current between 2023 and 2025. Through the course of today, you'll get more insights into what we put there. It's also some surface information of that. A lot of in-depth on the polls are on our website, and we're not trying to give you an encyclopedia to go back with. This is just most of them will be the infographics, but you'll find more information on our website. But they cover issues around governance, politics, democracy, economic finance, trade, health, human services, power, and basic infrastructure, social development, human rights, environment, food, culture, and pop, just a flavor of the different things that we work in. And the idea is that this provides you some sample of what we've done, and we hope that it will serve as a valuable resource for you journalists, editors, analysts, communicators, as you contribute to your critical work of informing the public. We're also presenting these as a flavor of some of the topics that we explore, and in the interactive session, we hope to get some feedback from you on what you think are critical information that would enable us to guide the public sentiment. You will find out that when you look at these polls, you will find that Nigerians have issues that are still very basic. But somehow, in the discourse that goes around, we're entering an election season, the discourse is about politics, it's about party, it's about who is this. Nobody's discussing what are the real issues facing Nigerians, of which anybody that is trying to govern this country should be talking to us how they intend to address these issues. This is what we hope to achieve, to make sure that the Nigerian sentiment are in the public discourse and the people that are attending or intending to take positions of leadership address how they will address these issues rather than focusing on who is a better politician than the next. In conclusion, I hope that beyond today's presentation and discussion, we would have a rich conversation, thoughtful questions and meaningful engagements, and we hope that this Parley becomes the beginning of an ongoing dialogue that will promote responsible storytelling, data-driven journalism, and ultimately a more informed society. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to having a productive and engaging session. It is truly an honor that you granted us your presence today, and we hope that we can get to a place where we are able to inform, educate, and hold institutions accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelly. I'm head of NOI, not NOIPolls. My colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I have 10 minutes to speak, and I've prepared a 40-point slide. So what I'm going to do, I will provide perhaps an overview, and if there are aspects of the slide I need to point your attention to, I'll probably go there, as the case could be. And the point I'm trying to make is that what we are witnessing today, the subject matter that is in focus today, is not something that is especially new. It is steeped in history. Yes, we seem somewhat overwhelmed, we seem somewhat disturbed, and of course, policymakers are also appearing confused, because public sentiment can be very, very dangerous if not properly managed, if not properly obfuscated by facts and evidence, as the case could be. But it's not just happening in the present. It is steeped in history once again. Remember very clearly one of the greatest forerunners of knowledge, Socrates, how he was murdered. He was murdered not because he was guilty, he was murdered only because public sentiment was whipped effectively against him, that he was ungodly, that he was anti-authorities, and of course when the time was right, the authorities moved against him and said this person, is someone who shouldn't exist at all. And judgment was passed, and of course he was killed, and it was much later in history that his innocence was proved, as the case could be. Then come forward slightly again into history, look at the Roman Empire. We all know the story somewhat of Emperor Augustus, who later became Octavius, who later became Emperor Augustus. Remember the kind of stories he weaved around the famous Mark Antony, how he said, he was in love, again, that question of love, with Cleopatra, and he was going to concession Rome, the famous Rome, with lots of prestige to Egypt. And the Romans would never have that of themselves as people who were very, very proud. But of course, it was effectively used by Emperor Augustus. And on account of being able to win public sentiment, public sentiment that easily that comes in a rush, that sweets emotion most, that gratifies fastest, public sentiment that is largely about speculation, about sensation, is sold very fast. And of course, what happened to Mark Antony? He failed, Emperor Augustus rose, and he took advantage of public sentiment, wrongly anyway, to ascend to the famous Roman throne, as the case would be. Then come forward again into history, in the Second World War, how propaganda worked, and how propaganda helped Nazi Adolf Hitler, to achieve the milestone negatively that he achieved, as the case could be. And of course, such propaganda oftentimes we will say something that we class as negative, but propaganda may not necessarily be negative if you have to use it for positive reasons. And that's why the famous retailer defined it as the dissemination of information from the sender to the receiver for the benefit of serving the sender. Okay? In serving the sender, you may not necessarily be for negative purposes. It will be for positive, collective, and for public good. So propaganda may not necessarily be negative, which is why we do not have to conflate it with sentiment. But again, let's come leave the question of propaganda, the question of the Second World War, and come very fast into history and how technology itself that we're talking about arose. Before now, in the beginning, we celebrated the book culture and how the book culture helped us to propagate news, information, to disseminate information, and we're very celebratory. We congratulated the world that technology had come. But after the book culture, we also had the telegraph, and we were celebrating. When it came with its own downside, and come forward again to the telephone era, the landline that is, we celebrated as well, but it came with the downside. Then of course, quickly forward into the period of the internet. It wasn't supposed to be something that you and I will be using until Tim Berners-Lee came up with the World Wide Web, okay, that democratized and liberalized it, and come forward into the 80s and 90s, and in 2000s, we're having social media, digital media, that has brought in the question of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and the WHO has added infodemic. Dangerous trend, okay, that thrives or that encourages public sentiment. Public sentiment, remember again, comes in a rush, comes like water across the tap, and it suits the human psychology fastest. It suits the human psychology best because it can be very entertaining, it can be very enjoyable. Sometimes where you have some kind of belief that syncs with your bias, you do not want to hear the fact. But where do we now come in? Where does evolution come in? Where is the intersection now? The intersection comes in the role of the journalists. And what is our role? Our traditional role, okay, that cannot be vitiated irrespective of the rise of the digital smart media, which has enabled all and sundry to be able to communicate in real time in their closets, irrespective of the fact, irrespective of what their characteristics and their intentions are. You know, we have seen the rise of closet nymphomaniacs, closet psychopaths, people who will sit only before the computer, only on their smartphone, and probably create damages. Okay, damages that probably take time, that will definitely take time to remedy. We cannot do anything about this, but the much we can do as professionals, okay, is to counter those sentiments, those facts. You know, not just with the facts that we know, not just because we are professionals who are supposed to write information wrongs, but because we have an oath, the oath that you liken to the Hippocratic oath in the mold of the medical doctor. And that what is that oath? The oath of ethics. Because the system, the society, regard us as armor bearers of public trust, as beacons of truth, as light, as a section that is supposed to shine the light, that is supposed to provide the sunshine on the clouds and the haze of misinformation that is predominating, or that has predominated the system, that has become preponderant in the system. And make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, and I mentioned it earlier, there's nothing you can probably do fundamentally about it. Because there's no technology that has come in history that has not come with its own downsides. Even the aeroplane, when it came in 1903, courtesy of the Wright brothers, it came with crashes. And come forward to 2026 that we are in, much as technology has tried to improve on aircraft, on the machine, we still have crashes. Why? Because everything that is under the sun will definitely have, it will have, a side that man will become, will find it difficult to fathom, as the case could be. Then of course, what about the motor car? Wonderful invention, but it has its own downside, crashes. Okay, the dynamite, what was it supposed to be for? It was supposed to be essentially for engineering, for construction, but eventually it came up with its own downsides. Humanity also started using it for warfare, and we are celebrating the coming of the information age, the world of artificial intelligence, taking us into the Internet of Things, and it is welcoming us. It's also coming with its own downside. Are we going to run away from it? No. The task before us is to manage it. And who are those at the forefront of that management? And I'm saying they are the managers of information, essentially the journalists, the writers, those who produce, who gather information, and those who share information. The journalists are the center of it. And what should his weapon be? The weapon that you and I know. Truth, evidence, factual, evidence-based reporting. Evidence-based reporting, remembering that you have an obligation not just to yourself, but to the organization that you represent, and on a larger note, to the society that you are supposed to communicate, that you are communicating with. Because you are not working for yourself, you are not working for the present, you are also working to leave a legacy for your future, as the case would be. Can I have water, please? Now, having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to conclude by saying that we are in a world of 24-hour news cycle. The internet is restless. The internet is restless. We are also restless. It's available to us now and again. Okay, and because it's available, competition is also frenetic. The average person wants to have a smartphone in your hands. You are at liberty to call yourself a journalist, And of course, we're having different categories of professionals coming up. They are on-air personalities, influencers, okay? And we have some content providers, content managers, different shades of professionals. And of course, they're probably not certificated, no traditional training that the ideal proper journalist has. But against that background, once more, what do? Do you run away from the matrix? No, you do not run away. You stay in that matrix and try to see how you can shape it. But at the end of the day, truth will always override. And remember how truth outlived the experience of Socrates, how truth also experienced outlived the experience of Mark Antony, and how truth outlived our experience in the Second World War. And if truth will always outlive all those dangerous or unpalatable experiences, we should rest assured that we are just in another moment of trial, and eventually truth will also outlive our present experience. And do not forget again, we are stepping into even a more sophisticated age. Now we are amazed at what artificial intelligence is doing. We're going to be more amazed in the near future, where we're beginning to see more innovations. Now I'm talking to you and you're looking at me. Until I say one or two things, you probably may not make a meaning out of my gestures. But there will come a time where I'll just only look at your eyes and I will know what you're thinking about me. I will know what is in your mind, because technology is advancing to those levels. And we should not undermine any possibility because of the frenetic competition going on in the world of information capitalism. It's a new world that we are stepping into. But the argument once more is that as journalists, we need to be prepared. We need to be bearers of the popular trust, and we should not vitiate it. Remembering the traditional things that we often subscribe to: truth, evidence-based reporting, and once more, facts, as the case could be. On this note, I'm going to stop, ladies and gentlemen, and allow you to please feel free to give me a round of applause.
What can we provide information about what Nigerians think about issues representing to you? It will help you as media people to accurately report public opinions on issues that affect the country. It enables journalists to produce fact-based analytical stories, strengthen investigative and policy-focused reporting. This component also highlights the issues affecting citizens. So like we said earlier, a couple of topics, various topics that cut across democracy, governance, elections, climate change, we are all put together in this document. So it will help the media identify the most important concerns of the public, such as economy, governance, security, public services, different issues. The compendium also strengthens accountability. It provides the media basis to compare government actions with citizen expectations. So sometimes you see policymakers sit somewhere in the offices making policies without even getting to know what the people are saying. So this compendium gives you the opportunity to see what citizens in the country, regardless of where they are staying, whether in the urban or the rural areas, states or regions, where they are staying about issues that affect them. Of course, it encourages public dialogue. With the poll results, it stimulates informed national conversation among citizens, civil society organizations, and of course, decision makers. Now, there have been a lot of questions about sample size. Why do we choose to interview only 1,000 Nigerians as opposed to over 150 million citizens across the country? So that has been said earlier in the video we showed you earlier. But just to summarize that, 1,000 sample size is acceptable for opinion polls across the globe, and we are maintaining that. The sample size of 1,000 is commonly considered ideal for national opinion polls in countries like Nigeria, where you have over 200 million people, because it provides good balance between statistical reliability and, of course, cost and speed. This means that if a poll shows 50% support for something, the true value in the population is likely between 47 and 53%. Population size has little effect. We talked about that earlier with the analogy, some of the analogy that was shown to us. In statistics, once a population becomes very large, let's say millions, the required sample size does not increase much. Whether population is 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, 200 million, in the case of Nigeria, the sample size of 1,200 represents, respondents still represent the population of the country, if the randomization is actually done rightly. So, like we said earlier, if you go to hospital and want to know the level of blood in your system, you don't need to ask the doctor to remove the entire blood to see whether you have or not. Or, so what the doctor needs to do is just take a sample, done the scientific test to see what's the quantity of blood in your system. Cost and logistics. 1,000 sample size, surveying 1,000 sample size people in Nigeria increases reduces field cost. So you don't have to travel to locations to get what Nigerians are saying. So with that issue of logistics, cost of travel is of course cut out. So again, increasing the sample size does not add to the value, or it does not add to it does not improve the precision. So the improvement may be something very minimal. That is to say that 1,000 sample size will probably give you exactly what you can get if you increase the sample size. What's important is the accuracy that is implemented. Again, it's a standard practice for polling across the globe, looking at major polling organizations across the world like Afrobarometer, the Gallup, Pew Research Center. These organizations have consistently maintained 1,000 sample size in their poll that are well largely referenced across the world. Again, the 1,000 sample size helps in the case of Nigeria, where we have people that speak different languages, people live in urban and rural areas. So the 1,000 sample size helps us to stratify according to age, gender, education, geographical location, even states. So with that, again, like I said, what's important is how are you able to stratify the 1,000 sample, the population that you sample. Stratification, if that is done right, it will actually give you exactly what you can cause if you increase the sample size. So why are we doing this? This compendium of polls provides credible data-driven insight into public opinions in Nigeria. So what we're providing this information for you as media people to use to guide you in their reporting. They provide evidence-based data for accurate reporting, public dialogue, and accountability. So we're encouraging you to please make use of it. It's not just what you are believing in, there are quite a lot, which you can as well see in our website by the time you visit there. What I'm bringing today is just a few of the compendium we have put together on the website. So looking at the topics we have selected for this discussion, we have classified our polls in various themes. We have governance, politics, and democracy, where we have, under governance, politics, and democracy, we have governance approval rating trending across and trend. So we measure trends from 2010 to 2015, where we give citizens the opportunity to rate their leaders, elected leaders. We also have polls on elections in Nigeria series. So this is where we poll around politics, elections, viability, polls around elections. Independent day poll, where we give Nigerians opportunity to rate the country's independence, or what they think, whether the country is headed in the right direction, is independent, or the country is headed in the wrong direction. These are some of the things we find, of course, in the poll. And then we have, under governance and politics and the governance, politics and democracy poll, we have end of the year poll, where we again give the citizens opportunity to rate to talk about the expectations, how the country has fared so far from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Then we have economy, finance, and trade. We ask Nigerians questions around how they are coping mechanism on the economy. The economy, of course, is one of the major issues Nigerians are facing. So we only have questions around fuel subsidy, which was a topical issue in the country at some point in years back. We felt it's an important thing to gauge what Nigerians are saying about fuel government decision to remove fuel subsidy in the country. Then we have health. We have done extensive work in health and human services. It's an important area for those who are interested in reporting about health and human services. We have patient safety polls, health insurance polls, where we give them an opportunity to assess the health insurance policies of the country, whether Nigerians are even subscribed to health insurance policies in the country. Of course, we have malaria poll. Malaria is a topical issue in the country. Out of every 10 persons that goes to hospital, a substantial number of them say maybe we'll take them to the hospital is malaria. So we have malaria. We have polls around malaria, and of course cancer. Cancer is a topical issue in the country and affected almost every communities in the country. We have important results around cancer. And again, we have infrastructure and electricity. There are a lot of polls we have conducted under infrastructure and electricity, where we track electricity supply. Electricity, of course, in the country is an important issue in the country today, where on average they ask them to list 10 things that they want the government to address. Of course, electricity will come. But because of that, we are factoring electricity in our polls, trying to track how Nigerians perceive electricity supply in the country. Whether we have questions around whether they think paying more, we give them they prefer to pay more to get more, or to pay less to get less. So we have information on that. Access to water pool. We have water is an important issue in the country. We have polls around water. And again, public safety and security. Security is an important and interesting issue in the country. So we have a couple of polls. One of them is kidnapping poll. Kidnapping, of course, we know how rampant it is in the country today. We have interesting findings on kidnapping around the country today. Trend and pattern of kidnapping, cost of kidnapping, what government can do to help it up. A lot of information you can access when you go to see what we have in kidnapping poll. Then, social development and human rights polls. We have on child abuse in Nigeria trended. This question has been asked over time. We have question of what Nigerians think about child abuse, and of course migration. Migration at some point in the country a few years ago, it was a topical issue. Everybody want to, people want to a lot of people are considering migrating to countries of their choice. So we have questions on the propensity, why people consider going abroad, which country are they interested in going to. These are things you can find in those polls. And lastly, we have on climate change, environment and food security. We'll have questions for those of us who are interested in climate change and environment, have interesting findings on climate change and of course food security. So this is just a few of the polls you can see on our website. If you go to see some of, if you visit there, we have the reports are quite there. If you want more information, maybe trending analysis, comparative analysis, any form of analysis you want, you can always reach out to us for more information on how. But the goal here today is for you to start making use of these polls that give you opportunity to know what ordinary citizens in the country are saying. Unlike when our policymakers is in the office and think that things are going well, while if you go to the communities, rural areas, when they give their own opinion, you find that things are not really going the direction that our leaders are thinking they're doing. So thank you very much.
As the room is really cold, but we can say hi to one another. So can we warm up the room by saying hi to our neighbor?
All right, just before we do the highs, we're going to call on Prof to join the panel session. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, like I said, he did the theme framing session, and I think he still wants to. I'm sure that he has a lot of other things to tell us about. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is a professor of communication and media epistemology, whose career spans academia, journalism, and international policy consultancy. A former journalist with The Guardian and a University of Leeds Chevening scholar, and he holds a PhD in communication studies.
In today's hyper-connected world, a single tweet or a post or a story can ignite a national debate. A viral video, breaking news flashing across our screens before facts are even verified can topple reputations. Information spreads instantly, fueling public conversations at lightning speed. But here's the collision. How do we ensure that these conversations are shaped by credible data rather than speculation? Now, this is very crucial, especially as the 2027 election draws close. Speed trumps accuracy, virality erodes trust, and narratives overshadow evidence as we risk polarizing societies and undermining democracy itself. Now, my esteemed, very seasoned, experienced, might I say, my bosses today will help us unpack these tensions where data versus narrative, can hard numbers cut through emotional storytelling. Speed versus accuracy is first worth being wrong. Digital virality versus public trust. How do we rebuild credibility in an algorithm-driven echo chamber? And we will kick off the conversation today by diving first into the question of narrative versus data, which is for Mr. Seun Okinbaloye. Now, let's start with you. In your view, how often does media narratives shape public opinion before credible data enters the conversation?
Good morning, everyone. Prof, good morning. Sugar. I think it's important for us to lay the foundation, and I think we're mostly journalists in the room. It looks like the foundations to our business or our practice has been eroded, and if we are in the same room, we should probably tell ourselves the truth. And I think, interestingly, himself and I had been trained and worked in the same environment, and it looks to me that there are some fundamentals that we have forgotten. And I wish that there are a lot of things that are happening today. Maybe some of us were trained when internet didn't exist. So where encyclopedias and dictionaries and DJs were at the center of the newsroom, where the BBC and some other foreign news wires were the only source of wires and news that are available. And your editors will directly ask you to go to a library in town to go and do a research. But now you can go on a computer and find things really easily. Without sounding, and the reason why I wanted to say this is so that I can lay a quick background to what I want to say. The fundamentals of who a journalist is, or what journalism is all about, is about data and information. And the tools or the skill set of the journalists are enshrined in these very four major areas: collection of data, verifying such, analyzing it, and presenting the information. Now, when we collect data, it's supposed to be verified. But these days, what do we find? There's no verification. Social media has become the source for information, and speed has now become a major problem of our practice. And it's unfortunate that the folks that are coming into the practice in the last 5-10 years have learned the wrong things. And in the life of me, I don't know where, other than opinion writers, where journalists have opinion. Journalists never had opinions. We never shared our opinions. We were until recently, journalists have now become activists, opinion shapers. We are not opinion shapers. We just get information, break it down, verify it, analyze it, and present it to the public. And Section 22 of the Constitution has said our job to the public is to hold government accountable. We are not to send people to jail. We are not the one to sentence people on television, on radio, on the front pages of newspaper. And I wanted us to just check. It's just like what the church is also become, because I'm also a Christian. The church has also lost similar value and the fundamentals of the reason why such institutions are there in the first place. So data is key, because the essence of our job is information. Without information, we cannot act, and we cannot be able to practice properly. But it's unfortunate that the misuse of the data has become a major problem in our practice, and that's why, for me, I look at the topic in a more different way. It's for me sitting down and sitting back and asking myself, where did we miss it? Where did we go wrong? At what point did we become such? We allowed some rubber-rousers in our practice to now take the lead in our practice. In the days that I made reference to, in the newsroom, like I mentioned, people that probably we met apart from learning in the classroom, the people we met on the field. And it's also good, sometimes maybe we should call these people that taught us this job and ask them, what exactly has gone wrong? What kind of virus has hit our practice such that a VDM will call himself the media and a journalist? There's some very ridiculous personalities that have made a mockery of our profession. Journalism is an honorable profession. Until recently, some people have made a mess and a mockery of it. And I think that we as practitioners, we need to just hold the brakes, ask ourselves the critical question, because I'm going to warn that in 2027 election, it's going to be a very dangerous path for our country, because journalism is going to be hit hard, alternative facts are going to arise, misinformation and disinformation is going to be on the rise. We're going to see attack on our profession more than ever before, and some of us are going to be ridiculed first even before the election starts. That is always the practice of politicians and those who want to use journalism and the media for against the public, because what they want is that they know there's a public sentiment that won't work in their favor. Those who are in the business of dissemination of information, they want to first of all attack them, destroy them, and make a mockery of them so that they are not acceptable to the public. So we need to be very careful as journalists in the kind of things that we get ourselves into. I thought, I hope that I'm not preaching, I just wanted to let this out. It's a burden that I've held for so long. And I think that it has eroded our practice, and we as professionals need to prick ourselves, touch ourselves, and ask ourselves the critical questions. How did we get here? Things are very bad, trust me.
Thank you very much for setting up a critical issue there. I remember my days when I started working in the newsroom on radio, way about 2006. I started with transcribing. Those days we record FR Radio Nigeria, and then my editor will tell me, oh yeah, transcribe ahead of 6 o'clock news, and you have to get everything word for word to be careful that you don't miss a thing, don't miss a fact. And that's how I was trained. But I don't see it happening anymore. Yes, we have transcended beyond, transcribing, we get our sources directly and all that. But that critical training, that foundation, I think is beginning to be eroded. And I would like to talk to Mr. Sumner Sambo. All right. We're talking about speed versus accuracy, how speed shapes what we publish. Considering your years, your experience, enlighten us on how journalists can actually balance the pressure for speed with the responsibility for accuracy, especially when reporting statistics or polling data.
All right, thank you so much, everyone here, and I'd like to thank NOI for the opportunity to be here, and to thank all my colleagues here. I can see my boss, Mr. Seun Okinbaloye, is also in the house. So good to have you, Mr. Emmanuel, Maiden, and a host of us here. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. Mr. Paul, you've been there in the game for long. Thank you so much for still being here. Actually, I was one of those who got excited when NOI was introduced 20 years back, because it was like an opportunity for us to be able to harvest some very good data. Because in those days, I remember we used to, depend on Gallup polls and all of that. Most of the things that they used to do, it doesn't concern us. They hardly come here. And so, thank you so much for still continuing. The fact that you're still here 20 years after still means that I know it's not been easy, and you've always had those fights with government and politicians, especially with your last poll results in the last election, where you had those 3 polling statistics being released. They all predicted Peter Obi will be winning. I think it was with Anna Foundation, and you know how controversial that would then go ahead to be. But it actually tells us how important it is to gauge public sentiment towards elections, towards policy directions and all of that. And as journalists, the role that we have to play, here is accuracy. And I would like to say that we're in the same line of business actually, in case you don't know. But it's just that you have a niche, but we go into different all sort of things and all of that. Gathering, information, and then doing surveillance, getting views of people here and there. So it's been an exciting time out there. But like you said, back to the question, the issues of speed, the issues of accuracy, very, very important. The issues of gauging public sentiments, very, very important. And I would like to give you an instance as to why it's very, very important for us to understand public sentiments. And I'm a political journalist. That's my own specialty. I've carved out over the years. And let me take your minds back to 1979 election. So, 1979 election was almost like what happened in 2003. And there were lots of people polling. By then, polling wasn't very strong. So, in those days, Nigerians usually rely on the people who are still in the business, and they're called prophets, and then people who are seers and so on. So there's one gentleman called Professor God's Power, Oyewole. So he used to actually write for a publication known as Lagos Weekend in those days. And he made a prediction that the 3 top contenders in that election, 1979, were the UPN candidate Obafemi Awolowo, the MPP candidate Nnamdi Azikiwe, and then you have the MPN candidate Shagari. So he then made a prediction that the winner of the election is going to be someone whose name is in the Bible. And so, I mean, people would then go to work, everybody. The winner of this election is going to be someone whose name is in the Bible. Those of the UPN started going around. You know, Obafemi Awolowo, they had to dig his name. And they brought Jeremiah. Oh, yeah, acting center, you know, politicians, they throw away that name. And then for Azikiwe, they went around and said, oh, okay, yes, it was Christian Benjamin. And then what of the other gentleman? So, well, they were rattled. They didn't really know what was happening. So they just kind of like said, okay, maybe, okay, but we'll continue to do our work. And then Professor Gospel Oyewole would then go ahead and said that the first initial of that name is S. It starts with S. So what then goes ahead is that, I mean, these two gentlemen, they are all, it just seemed like they were all removed, right? Yeah. Because we had a Benjamin here, and then Jeremiah. So by the S, what name in the Bible? And Shagari is a Muslim. And it's not, you know, there's no Shagari in the Bible. There's no Aliyu, there's no Shehu. So these gentlemen would then go ahead and research, the MPN team, research around until they got to the book of Judges, and they discovered a name that was called Shamgar. So, and that Shamgar was neither a man nor a woman, but was the child of someone called Anath. And the person just, you know, came to come and resolve a problem that he had and then disappeared from the scene then. So they would then go ahead and say, look, they found a name, and that name relates to Shagari. His name is Shamgar. They've seen it very clearly and so on. And they hit the streets with a lot of propaganda and so on. And then I said that they even found the name of the mother of Shagari in the Bible and all of that. So, well, just to cut the story short, eventually there was a justification for the winning of the election. But what does that tell us? Towards heading to elections or bigger events, there's always that public interest as to where the direction of the thinking of the people is. And that's where we play our roles as journalists. And that's where the issues of accuracy come in. Yes, prophets will come around, pollsters will come around and all of that, but as journalists, we need to keep our eyes on the ball. Look at statistics, look at candidates, x-ray them, and then report them accurately. Because there's a lot of misinformation that's been touted as journalistic work. And that happened in 2023. A whole lot of people were caught, you know, napping. And it's very, very sad that actually the race to be first got so many media houses into, you know, big trouble. Sometimes we also allow the sentiments of politicians to drive what looks like, you know, accurate conversations when we know that they are not. So as journalists, let's be guided with the sort of information, confidential information that people come to us with also, that are not based on facts. Fact-checking is something that we should put ahead of speed and ensure that accuracy goes ahead to be the bedrock. Because yeah, I mean, everybody will get excited when you put out a story immediately. But by then, when the facts come out and it's not accurate, how does that position the media house or the journalist? It lowers your credential and so on. And it's unfortunate that even what Seun was saying, I mean, some of the older generation that he's making reference to, I could tell because I interviewed some of them on air, and they spilled out some information that were not factual. Because sometimes we allow ideological leanings or ethnic leanings to guide our work as journalists. And if you look at these two elections I talked about, 1979 and 2023, we had those scenarios. And that's where Nigeria's major problem usually comes from. In an election where you have someone from the north, someone from the east, and someone from the west. Shagari was from the northwest. Azikiwe was from the east, southeast, and then, of course, Obafemi Awolowo was from the southwest. And then in 2023, the same thing, Atiku Abubakar this time around northeast, and then, of course, we have Peter Obi from southeast, and then, of course, we have President Tinubu, who is there now, from the southwest. And that inflamed a whole lot of passion. A whole lot of journalists were no longer seeing the roads clearly because of inflamed passions. Now, statistics, even when they come out from polling agencies like yours, they were being colored, being called all sorts of names and so on. But we all know that as journalists, our fidelity is to the truth. It's not to individuals, it's not to institutions, it's not to governments or anything like that. So, in trying to wrap up my conversation for this, I want to ask that we should not allow social media to drive us. We should not even allow politicians to drive us or even fear. Because sometimes I wonder if we are not beginning to get into a situation whereby they are trying to curtail all our strengths as journalists. So even when you have the truth, the accurate information to put out, how the government will feel will now make you not to say it the way it's supposed to. Just like the National Bureau of Statistics. When they released data on the number of those who have been kidnapped, all of a sudden, this same institution that we thought was independent failed the nation. And they kept saying that no, the statistics was not like this, it wasn't like that, and so on. And a whole lot of people that I know outside the country started doubting any data that was coming out of the NBS, unlike the days when we had Dr. Yemi Kale and all of that and so on. Now that institution, and I told them recently when we had one-on-one, that thing really damaged a whole lot of things. Let's not become like that institution, but what is the thing that we must focus on? Where we make mistakes, we must admit, and we must follow a methodical approach to correcting the mistake so that we'll become professional. So it's not that you don't make mistakes as a journalist, but where you don't get your information accurate because of speed, because of the need to break the news, once that happens, then you should also follow a methodical way of actually apologizing to your audience. Thank you so much.
So many thanks for putting this very interestingly and succinctly for us to understand. Let me come to Professor Adeniyi. In your view, what do you see as the key factors driving the convergence of media coverage and public sentiment on certain issues? Remember, Mr. Sumner just talked about ethnic leanings, political ideologies. What are the key factors driving this?
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks again. I'm ready for giving me the second opportunity. And I actually requested for it because there were some things in my slides that I was not privileged to reveal that I imagine I will let out with these second comment, as the case could be. But first, let me provide a philosophical background to this second intervention. One is that I need us to remember that as human beings, of course, we are naturally different. And because we are different, we come up, we have different opinions at different times. And our opinion is a function of a couple of things. One, our age, our income group, our ethnic or identity, and of course, our exposure, our level of understanding in terms of education. All these things condition the opinion we hold about any subject matter at all. And let's remember again that Nigeria is a multi-ethnic, fragile society, with different categories, different classifiers, oftentimes conflicting because of anxiety of coexistence anxieties around mutual, survival, mutual thriving, as the case could be once again. So against this background, the average person will want to be expressive, be expressive. But before now, that opportunity was not there. The media was top down, top down in the sense of being controlled by the average capitalist, or essentially the media entrepreneur. One who will afford the machines, one who will afford labor, who will pay labor. That was the narrative, in the days of old, in the days of the traditional media. But that narrative has changed now, where we have witnessed liberalization, the democratization of the space, which has now made everyone with that natural opinion to be expressive. Okay? And like I said earlier in my presentation, it's something that is going to continue. It's something that professional journalists may not be able to do anything about. And which is why I want to see this thing. I want us to see what we're experiencing, what the media is experiencing, as a matter of a call for redefinition. Journalism is under some kind of trial that requires a redefinition. And I'll provide a panacea, in my own opinion. Before that panacea, let's also know that journalism is not the only profession that has been isolated in this crisis of redefinition. Even engineering is. Law is worth it. To write an agreement, for instance, you probably do not need a professional lawyer. If you are AI savvy, if you get on any of the applications, ChatGPT, Gemini, and all of that, it will write it clinically out for you, like a professional lawyer may not even be able to do. And of course, you can go ahead and do some stamping for yourself, blah, blah. And you move on. That money that you used to pay that lawyer, if you choose not to pay that lawyer anymore, you may not. And of course, what about medicine? Medicine is also witnessing challenges. Sometimes when people have any kind of ailments, they just go on the internet first to see what the matter is, and of course create some anxiety for themselves when they go to see the professional. And you probably have to go to see the professional because you have to do some practical tests, laboratory tests, which you are not vast in. And of course, what about just any kind of, if you go to a laboratory, for instance, you come up with a medical result, just dump that medical result on any of these AI applications. It will analyze it for you better than the human medical doctor could probably do. And sometimes if you are savvy, depending on your mastery, your ability to use it properly, it can tell you how long you will live. You're right? Now, that's the age we are in, the age of redefinition. But the journalists too, of course, we are somewhat hit, but not worse hit, because we are the armor bearer of truth, of facts, of evidence, right? And sometimes, again, we are there, to guide the shapers or those, who propel the society. Those are the commanding heights of power. Now, what we do is, what we can do in circumstance really, is to hold that armor properly. And there are some things that I highlighted, although intangible, but very strong things, that we need to bear in mind. And by the time we bear it in mind, they become the truth, the beacon, that will, if not in the present time, condition people to what the fact actually is. Because sentiment is fluid, it is fleeting, it is not permanent, right? And it only takes time before it dissolves. But it cannot dissolve on its own without the intervention of facts, without the intervention of evidence that only the journalist can provide. Only the professional that is trained can provide it. And of course, this is something that we need to bear in mind. And we need also appreciate the fact that the audience that we are reporting to, yes, as professional journalists, we communicate with the audience, we disseminate information to the audience. The one that is not also trained, the one that has only the smartphone in his hand that is also disseminating, sharing information, communicates it as well to the audience, right? Now, we shouldn't take the audience for granted. Imagining that the audience does not know, cannot necessarily separate the wheat from the chaff. The mass of the sections of the audience may not be able to do this, but there are some sections too that are immensely circumspect, and we want to see or to hear from credible sources, credible sources before they go home with a story. Those days in journalism class, I'm sure many of us here will remember, Marshall McLuhan told us that the medium is the message.
Yeah.
But that theory has been vitiated by the facts around us now. And what is that fact? It is not just one medium that will validate information for you. Sometimes you need a conflation of credible medium before you believe a story, as the case could be. I mean, let me use television because I can see many of television news superstars here, right? There are quite a number, there are so many television stations out there now. Some of them internet-based, some of them in some corners around Abuja. Now and again, they invite me for I want to visit the place. You know, so just to say that there are so many of them around town, right? And if anyone comes up with some kind of story, I first of all look at that, the identity of the channel, okay? And of course, if I have to believe it, pardon me, I'm just talking about my own experience, and sometimes I also know that quite a number of people may be able to corroborate this. Now, before I can believe that story, I'll probably want to see it in channels next, and maybe Arise, and maybe which other one is, maybe NTA. Then of course, then I can now validate it and say it is true. So it's no longer one source being the messenger and therefore credible, but a confliction of credible sources before I can believe it. So the audience is also knowledgeable, and which is why I'm going to conclude by saying that what we need to do as journalists is to be doing what we are doing in the best way possible, noting that it's just a matter of time before truth comes in and provide clarity, provide stability, and of course stabilize the institution of the media as one critical infrastructure in the development of any social system, Nigeria not exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Really succinctly put. And I want to also draw attention to the fact that journalists also make use of social media. So you should use a platform to counter misinformation. You have TikTok, you have Instagram, you have Facebook, you have, there's another one. X. Yes, there's another one I'm trying to remember. Anyway, yes, Threads. So you can use your platform to inform people, counter misinformation. You know, it stands you out from every other social media creator or content or a so-called journalist. Yeah, bloggers. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, so let's just move ahead, turning our attention to viral media versus evidence. I'd like to hear all your submissions on this question. Can credible polling data compete with viral misinformation in today's digital media ecosystem? Let me start with you, Mr. Okinbaloye.
We're just trying to validate the essence of polling. And for me, what is important also, as a journalist or as a polling organization, the polling because you want to emphasize the narrative. You want to emphasize a fact that you are drawing out of opinions of people. So you go into a community, and that's why the first thing that people who do not agree with the poll, but they will say, how many people did they even poll? They went into one community in one foreign place, and a lot of polls that came out, and I've had to interview people who had, put together a poll. I remember the poll that came before the 2020 election where Anna Foundation did. When I interviewed him, so I said, okay, to side. I was one of the most attacking moments for me in the 2023 elections. And I thought that it's not me, it's go to the organization that did the poll. You will see hate message, useless man, you failed in banking, you did this, you went to them, and this useless idiot gave him a whole 1 hour. People they disagree about, because what you don't see or what you don't agree with, you never believe it. Yeah. All right? And that's why even the miracle workers of these days, they almost pluck people's eyes, just for you to see that they want to heal the person. Or they lay hands on you when you are not falling down. They put more pressure. When the pressure is not enough, they do a little bit of push. When that push is not enough, they really do the push and you fall on the floor. By falling on the floor means that the miracle is working. For me, in this time, the credibility of the organization is very key. And there are a lot of polls, I'm very certain that NOI has done that. You wonder that people are not talking about it. It is not controversial. It is not election. It is not saying that cancer has killed more people and all of that. That we are in Nigeria. Once your poll is in the positive direction, it doesn't generate the kind of, and that is what the news cycle is also about. If inflation is in the green, even the journalists don't pick it. As an editor, if you bring an inflation that is looking positive to me, I'll say, can you look at food inflation? Is it high? It's high. And it's not because the journalist is a bad person, but it's just a sentiment of the average viewer or audience who thinks that the best news, and when I'm couching headlines sometimes, I'm always imagining what you're thinking, what will tease your fancy, what will make you sit back. And that also will happen a lot in 2027 as we move towards the elections, where we will see a lot of what is tantalizing to the eyes are the ones that are in the negative. And we are also very, very vulnerable as journalists to want to take, if you see an average of 50-50, see good news on one hand, see bad news on the other hand, you are almost likely to put the bad news as your top stories. And the same thing with polling. There's a tendency that you're likely to tell people that 78% of Nigerians are living in darkness. That's when people will be interested in looking at the poll. But when you say that more Nigerians can feed now, there's a lie. So I think it's important, and I think this handshake is very critical for us in the media. The part of our job that is very tedious to do is the analysis part of our job. So you see a range of data and patterns and making sense of it. It's not an average, it's not every journalist that can do that job. The polling organization have the tenacity, and that's why your poll takes a longer time, because you need to process it, you need to analyze it. Unfortunately for those of us who do politics, patterns, data, people's behaviors form a certain way that we aggregate the data. And so when you have that tendency of speaking to 1, 2, 3, 4 people, the other political parties come to you and say that you are biased because you're speaking to these people. Because the last time I interviewed this person, only 1,000 people watched. The last time I interviewed this person, about a million plus people watched. Do I have a tendency to want to interview this guy more? I think so. And I'll give this example, for example. A lot of people don't like to hear Wike's voice, apart from the fact that his voice is husky. But data has told me that in 2025, he's the most watched person for news and interviews. When you interview him, he likes to talk. He's an interviewer's delight. You may not like his opinion, you may not agree with him. The people who don't like him love to listen to him. And I'll give you an example. Channel, we have about 2 streams on channels where we stream our programs and news. Averagely, you can average, if you look at most media organizations, you average 3,000 in a good watch on some of these streams, sometimes 6,000. I do an average of maybe like 8,000, 7,000, on good days 11,000, depending on what you're watching. An average week's interview gets 22,000 people streaming in different platforms. You guess what? Sometimes we add another stream, it gets almost at the same level. Now, it gets to the point in time that when you're watching a weekend's interview, on all your platforms, it will beat what you have done in 6 months. Your average viewing, and I'm giving you a back-end data as a journalist. Whatever anybody has what. So apart from the fact that as an interviewer, I don't want to interview him every time because I think people are tired. I think I'm tired. There's a lethargy about. But guess what? The guy appears on the media chat, on the media Parley, where every organization has representative there. And a week later, he comes to my program, and I see the numbers, and the number says otherwise. The number tells me that people want to watch this guy. And as I'm doing 1 hour, more people, I'll tell the producer, tell Lagos, add 1 more hour to it. And I'm doing 1 hour, guess what? It's not coming down. The figures are increasing. And if you are in the administration here, especially finance, you know what those figures say. Then I tell them, add another hour, making 3 hours. We get 3 hours. Yes, I'm going to give you 3 hours because the numbers are rising. People who say they don't like him are listening to him. So you ask yourself, what is it that Nigerians love to watch anyways?
Exactly.
I bring a Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Only 300 people are watching. And the man is feeling fast. He's talking sense.
Yes.
But people are not watching. So, the data, opinions are very interesting to analyze. And sometimes, don't overbeat yourselves about, as a professional, I've stopped doing that. You see the mob, when they come at you about what you do, they don't understand the reason why you do what you do anyways. But the economics of our job tells us something that we need to focus on what matters. You pay the bills. How do you pay the bills? You do more than your competitors sometimes. And so what people say they don't like is becoming more interesting. And guess what? Some data tells us that the most watching segment of the public are the housewives.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what data say. That the people that watch content the most, housewives. If you want to post anything online, and I have a business that thrives online, I'll tell you, they'll tell you post from 6 p.m. The analytics tells you the reason why. 7 p.m. on my program was a dead hour years ago on television, like 17 years ago. But down the line, it has become a prime time on television. So things are changing, and we need to learn the fact that this data, the opinion of people, and I want to conclude by saying the essence of our practice is public sentiment, because we are actually established for the public. Our work is public inclined. We are actually not doing it for ourselves. And data tells us that the age and period where we do things based on what we think as professionals is over. It's an age where once you give the public what they want, they will respond to you instantly. Once they don't like something, they will respond to you instantly. And once you get upset with your colleague on set, and I'm very sure my big bros there and had a fair share of that. If you have a little issue with your colleague on set, they will come out. The man is, see the way he's talking to his colleague. He's saying that. Once you have, or maybe you make a mistake, they will correct you right there. They will cycle your error on TV and they will post it on Instagram. Channels, TV. They can't even spell this right. Now, our job now is get immediate judgment. And it's at the center of the heart of the people, and which we need to be very, very careful. Who are we talking to? What segment of the public are we appealing to? As a political journalist, a lot of the times, I have 1 hour with a public office holder. I discuss politics for 35 minutes. I discuss governance for 15 minutes. Guess what? You see, when I start discussing governance, people will switch off. The numbers will drop. But once I start... when you defected from your party, people don't like you. They say, the numbers keep rising. But once I start saying, the water that leads to whatever, how do we get potable water to the community? So the numbers are dropping. So it's important for this data, and for example, I probably will look more into some of what you have to break it down in terms of graph.
I wish we had more time.
All right, sorry.
So I would come back to you, gentlemen. But for now, let's take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. who has a question, please step forward.
Oh, my name is Victoria. And I'm also the founder of the Stutter Awareness Foundation, a youth-led initiative in Nigeria. So my question is on speed. We spoke about speed and data. Okay, so I've had instances where we see things online. They say maybe a guy raped a girl, or just something. And then the next morning, I'm hearing or seeing that news on the TV without it being verified. And when such news are being shown on TV, automatically, somebody like me who thinks I can only get verified facts on TV, I then think that that is the truth. But then 2-3 days after, the same news comes back to say, oh, it was not true. And I'm just confused that what is really going on with the media? How are we as individuals supposed to get verified facts from the news?
Should we answer that, or should we just take the second question so that we can just,
Sean asked a question. Where did we all get it from? Sorry if my question may not be too much of a question. I'm just trying to react a bit of what we said. One of the ways we didn't get it right is that journalists were not prepared for citizens journalism. In 2011, I remember I went to Taiwan, where 2011 there was not much of social media, but it was being introduced. I went to Taiwan for a media workshop where citizens journalism was being introduced. And I found out that many people weren't ready for it. So, when I was doing a capacity building for journalists in 2020, you said something about journalists being on social media. I remember I was telling them, we're talking about evidence-based journalism. And I asked journalists to please go and be active on social media. And many of them said they cannot be competing with other people on social media, all those people that are doing this. They are trained, they are professionals. Now they have been overtaken. So journalists must learn to fight in this space. Then for NOI, it's not just to bring out data. You must bring out people that, he talked about analysis. You must bring out people that will analyze this data. Because a journalist who has so many stories to cover. You see, one of the things about journalism today is that you have somebody who is covering like 10 stories in a day or 5 stories in a day. And so he does not have the time to sit down and analyze your data. Please begin to train analysts who will come and be on TV or be interviewed by newspaper journalists on the data, so that, and what it means to the people, because the numbers may not mean anything to the ordinary man. But when you tell what those numbers will, the consequences of those numbers to the people, then they will learn. I'm sorry I didn't ask a question. I just wanted to put this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Emmanuel. All right, so just introduce yourself so that we get to know you.
Okay, my name is Christian Obodo. I'm the managing editor of Horizons, and my friend here that I'm still running away from to supervise my PhD program. All right, my question is simply this. Information capitalism that you mentioned in your brief lecture, how can you reconcile it with ownership ideology when you look at the media space in Nigeria?
Thank you so much. So can we give them time to respond?
I reflect two opinions of audience. Thank you and thank you.
So we have come to the very
call that Because how many of us can allow citizen doctors to operate on them? I don't know. Or a citizen builder to build a house for you. Or it is a citizen architect and all of that. So, I mean, I just feel that, you know, I mean, these are news enthusiasts. These are information enthusiasts. They can't call themselves, the fact they call themselves doesn't mean that we should.
No, you can't.
Do we have a citizen president, for example? We have no president. So whatever it is, they just call themselves. It's not it. And please, let's not be promoting it. I hate hearing it. Because when you go to the hospital, you don't look for a citizen pharmacist to give you medicine. Because you know if a citizen pharmacist gives you a medicine, you may just fall off and die once you just take it. So if that's the case, and you know how important information is, why should you go to a citizen? I mean, all these guys who are bloggers and all of that, they are just news enthusiasts. They are just people who are copycats. They just love the job that we do as professionals. But if you don't subscribe to the discipline that comes with it, why should I trust you? So, follow a verified media house, whether it's a TV house or a radio or a newspaper house, because the discipline that we subscribe to actually has set of things that will also make us to be subject to, you know, punishment if we go against it. And that punishment may not come from that media house. It actually comes from our colleagues. Because Seun is here. If he does say anything that he knows that's not factual, he knows I'm going to call him out. And it's not because of him, but because of the job that we both do. And because of people like you who are coming up. So that's the difference. And we speak to facts, we process facts, but do we make mistakes? Yes, every human institution makes mistakes. Just like the US has made a mistake right now going into Iran and bamboozling people, and it's corrupt. And it's not asking for help. 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, would you have ever thought that the United States of America would be asking for help from other countries to tackle an Iran? That's what happens when you allow sentiments to drive you, when you follow social media, when you don't do your research very well. Even in military, there's what's called precision thinking. In journalism, we also have precision thinking. But are we infiltrated? Yes. You have rogue journalists. You can't run away from that. And you have people, look, the major problem right now we have that's facing us are people who go online, open blogs, and they have 5 million followers, and the journalist who you know is well trained just has maybe like 50,000 followers. Who should you believe? The one who has 5 million or the one who has 50,000? Look, for your own sanity and health, follow that guy who has 50,000. Because we've seen all those guys who have 5 million and all of that saying things that cause chaos because they are not properly trained. And the fact that they are being followed by so many people doesn't make them, you know, the believability rate will always be low with them. The thing is that sometimes also, as journalists, we have people who bring information to us, and that's why the issues of speed, the issues of accuracy, you know, sometimes we'll fall victim to that because of the people who we know, trusted sources. Now, sometimes you have trusted sources, people you've relied on, but you don't know when they go rogue and they want to use you as a medium. They want to use a channel's television to pass this information. Why? Why not use AIT? Why not use Arise? Why not? Because of certain dynamics and certain viewership or certain people. For example, certain people want to do certain things right now. 3 to 4 years ago, or let me just give you a clinical example. Okay, so I used to be in TVC News like about 8 to 10 years ago. And so there are certain people that want to interview, and they will tell me that no, they will never ever want TVC to interview them, God forbid. In fact, there's a senior security person that I called that time, who we had problems with, and he just said, "You're from TVC. Do you know that TVC is Tinubu Voice Company?" Right? And now, that same person now, if there's an information, first, the first person he would want to pass it across to is TVC. Why?
Because we all know.
Why? Ask yourself why. So, because things have changed. Because the person who owns it is on top and all of that. So, there are dynamics that happen like that. And so sometimes because they want to create certain things, and because they know that the person who owns that or the first citizen of the country is always on that channel, they want to pass across that information on that channel and all of that. So there are ways that people want to manipulate us. And look, what do politicians, policemen, journalists, and prostitutes have in common? Do we know what they all have in common? It's very simple. They receive information from everyone. They sleep with everyone because they are looking for a way of surviving. This job that we're in entails you listen to everybody. Why do we have the alleged we keep using? Even when you know that someone kills someone. Lawyers, we all have the same thing in common. Because if someone comes to you, like you have said now, the issues of rape, it's pretty difficult to. But the thing is that, okay, sometimes we've been caught up now. This issue has gone viral. We've done our analysis and all of that. Like there was one young lady that came out the other time and said there was the issues of rape. The police too, there's a police statement and everything where this person wrote that yes, this rape occurred and all of that. And because we're institutional based too, if the police is inside of it and they have a statement and the doctor, maybe they've already done preliminary reports and something does come, the journalist's job is to report. Is to report that someone brought a rape case, the issue was taken to the police, there is an accused, and a doctor was brought. You don't want the journalist to now start telling you that whether the rape case was lie or not. No, you have to report, and if there's an update to it, you also report that, look, this same lady later came back and said everything she said was all what? False. And we've seen people even being taken to jail for that. So as journalists, we are not saints. But what makes us professionals is that whenever there's an error, we'll know how to. And then whenever the information goes the other way around, we'll still have to report. Our job is to report, whether it's right or wrong. I mean, we don't care. Just like I use this other, what's the example? Sorry, I had to use it, but of course, that is the way it is. As lawyers, you can be, today you see Femi Falana, he's handling this case, then tomorrow you are wondering, you thought that Femi Falana has to survive, he has a chamber and all of that. That's the way we are as journalists, we also have to survive.
Thank you so much, Professor Adeniyi, and then I'll come to you. So please do respond to Mr. Christian.
Oh yeah, thank you, Christian. I was not expecting anything. We don't question, no doubt. I'm not expecting anything less, like I said. Christian is one of the most experienced broadcast journalists we have in this country. No doubt, and of course, a chief news scholar. So thank you for giving me a difficult job to do. But I think information capitalism is also being redefined, because of all day we'll try to discuss, we'll be talking about how information dissemination channels have been liberalized, how it has been pluralized. We've been talking about it, by even people who are not trained, who don't subscribe to the business of pre-editing, and of course, Sumner emphasized it that we have people who merely traffic information. They are not necessarily citizen journalists, but just information traffickers, and people who move information from one place to the other blindly without being able to discern at their left from their right without having any basic understanding or having appreciation of the weight of the information that they are moving from one point to the other, eventually causing harm in different forms. At the same time, let's also remember that this is at one level of it. The other level of it is the emergence of information capitalists, information entrepreneurs, which is why there are stories around the place of how influencers are being paid, isn't it? Of how people how people are able to earn a living by simply doing one or two things online. that's another form of entrepreneurship coming up. I know quite a number of people, every day they don't go out, they are nested in their homes, and what are they doing? They are chatting either on TikTok, they will say they are working, right? They say they are making some earnings, you know, and there are some things that go on there that keep them going, as the case could be. So a different level of entrepreneur has also emerged, you know, on account of the rise of the internet, the expansion of the social media, and the pluralization of networks. You know, again, speaking to the question of the redefinition of the world that we are in. Everything is generally being redefined, and of course, it's going to continue into the future because technology is not going to abate. The innovation is not going to abate. Capitalism is always like that. It is characterized by technology, by competition, and competition has to continue. If they have to outdo the other, if they do not want to go on that, like Kodak did, creativity has to be multiplied, as the case could be. If they do not want to go on that once more, if they want to impact on the bottom line, and impacting on the bottom line is profitability. What is it? What is it that you are doing in business if you are not hoping to make a profit? You know, and of course, when you are making profits, there's an atmosphere of desentimentalization. Emotions are not there. You're not bothered about, you know, whose ox is God in terms of who is offended, who is affected, who is negatively impacted. You are concentrated only on the profits that you want to make. That's the downside of capitalism. We are seeing it in the age that we are in, and we'll continue to see it. But where our business comes in as professionals, you know, is to come in at the level of intervention, at the level of moderation, you know, providing facts, intervening with evidence, and of course sticking to that ordination that we had from the beginning, you know, and that ordination is to subscribe to truth and nothing else. But truth will not come from heaven. It will come from you going out there, going to the field, you know, separating the wheat from the chaff, you know, and of course cleaning it out and coming out with the gospel truth, as the case could be. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much. Just 2 questions only for this next round. 2 questions.
Okay. He mentioned something especially when he was talking about the narrative. Like in the olden days, journalists did not, let me say, could not have an opinion. So I want to find out, is it that it is wrong for journalists to have an opinion? Yes. Does it impugn? Can you, if it is yes or no, can you please just conceptualize what you mean? Because why I'm saying this is that when some of us were taught during that time he was talking about, when we did use specs mention and other things like that, they will tell us in the newsroom that you are setting agenda setting. Don't you think they are a little bit related? Thank you.
All right. Next question.
And whether deliberately, intentionally, or by error, push narratives that are false, of non-factual, or people make their whole argument based on something that is fundamentally wrong. Whose responsibility is it to let the people watching the show that on the previous episode, so information wasn't based on real evidence? Because I think that's one of the things that worry some of us. And then just as a follow-on, we've been talking about citizen journalism and all that. There is some responsibility that comes with influence. You know, so that person that has 5 million followers, whether they are trained or not, or has, whose responsibility is to hold those kind of situations responsible? Because it's not, as I'm asking people to decipher who is right. I mean, using a parallel example, if I'm trying to buy fuel, the filling station that has the most people is the one I'm going to go to, not because I have any evidence that they do better, but I think there's a reason why people are going there opposed to the other one. So the same reason where you have an individual that has a huge followership, he has the ability to set agenda, whether we think it is right or not. So whose responsibility is it to make something, as in for we that don't have the power to discern whether this is right to do? Thanks.
Do we take one more question or not? Because then it's fast running. Okay.
For media houses, you dish out news, they don't come after you. But over time, life has evolved, and now you have owners of some of these major communication outfit now delving into politics. So already they have an opinion, and you working there, they set an agenda for you. There's a narrative, they just set it for you. In-house is an in-house style, you must pursue it. That's an opinion now. You as a presenter, how do you deal with that? That's one. Secondly, we also saw what happened on the head-to-head show not too long. And for you, if you come to Nigeria, I've seen where some top government officials have been interviewed, they pounce on you as a presenter. And in some cases, when you present them with those facts and with the evidence, it's either they come for you through one way or the other. But then, if you notice what happened there is an international media, of course, were being humbled and nothing happened. Now, coming home now, how do you deal with that? You have your facts, you have your evidence, but you know that you're presenting it, you'll be pounced on. How do you deal with that? Thank you.
No mobile phone. There were no gadget that gives you instant ability to transmit information. The only means of transmission of information, if you remember, Sumner, years ago, if anything happened, anything after 6 p.m., the news is referred to the following day. It will not happen. The newsroom will not take it. So citizen journalism is not a name for a profession. It's a phenomenon that was started when citizens started using tools that have ability to transmit information to a larger more of people. And we forget easily that our own form of practice is categorized under mass media. Medium where you push out information to multiple people. So citizen journalism is when you are on the accident scene, and people do it a lot. It's a name called the ability as a citizen. When you are not a journalist, you carry your telephone and you start filming and you post it on social media. It's a form of citizen journalism, and that's where the phenomenon starts. Do I agree with those who have made a mess of that too, who now post a video they saw on the WhatsApp, or who is misleading information of 3 years ago, and they make it look like something of yesterday. And that's why it enunciates, and the reason why, and I agree with him, why some of us will get so upset when you see something like that happening in the newsroom, when people adore or praise those who call themselves citizen journalists, it's because of the sheer ignorance. Because you are trained, you practice, and you execute. And then these guys, they don't even have address if there's a misinformation for you to link them to. So, I mean, having said that, when I say that opinions are not for journalists, doesn't mean that media organizations don't share opinions. And that is the place of editorialization of stories. Media organization, and I think that Arise and This Day Group, it was a practice of this day for several years. During the election, this day we say, it's an American style journalism, which I don't subscribe to. I don't like it. But it's an American style of journalism to say, Chamberlain is going to win the next election.
Taking the decision,
the board of editors sits on it, and they take a decision that, based on this, and they will give their reasons. And look, it shapes opinion, because when you see
is in your position.
So it shapes opinion, because when a media organization comes out to say our editorial board thinks that this is the person that will win an election, doesn't mean they think this person has the capacity to defeat the opponent, but they think that, ethically speaking, this is the person that we think that is right for our society. And opinions are given. I do editorials on my program, which is one of the few times you find established editorials other than opinions when journalists come. And the reason why it is dangerous for us to share opinion in such an unorganized manner is this. What you see today might be different tomorrow. And your sentiment and your emotions that you attach to your opinion on a particular matter is seen differently. And you may not even be as skilled. Take for example, a journalist who is not a trained lawyer and is now talking and spewing things about law and saying that man is wrong, the judge is wrong, this is wrong, this. Tomorrow someone will school you and say you were wrong, and you see that you're wrong, but you're too shy to come back and say I was wrong yesterday. That's why it's very dangerous to our job fundamentally, and check it, is to inform, get information, process it, analyze it, verify it, double check, and disseminate. That's our job. And I remember that there was a time that I wanted to join a major newspaper some years back. And soon as they asked me, I remember there was a news battle. I was spending about 3 months or so in the newsroom. And the question, and I raised a particular story. Guess what the editor told me? He said, where do you think you are? This is not yellow journalism that you are practicing here. So there was a time that there was what we call ethical journalism and yellow journalism. Yes. But these days, yellow journalism and ethical journalism are more of the same. Yellow journalism is over. I know of an organization that the editor in this country, they will say 3 people died, they will say put 0 behind it, let it be 30. Intentionally, because that's the way of yellow journalism. We read Means and Boons those days, we read Hearts those days. Those are yellow, and they will describe, they can even take what does not exist and they will push it out there. But it's important for us to redefine, like Prof has called it. It's a moment of reflection for us in this practice. And what people don't know is this. Our job is so sensitive that if, and I used to tell people that if I want to destroy this country, it just takes me 3 days of consecutive organization of my thoughts in a manner in which I want to go about a narrative. I know the section of the public that listen to me, that watch me, and dedicated to my program. And I know the sheer numbers of my program. On the continent, I know where I sit in terms of the viewing of my program. So if I want to do it, I know what to do. And so our job is very sensitive in the heart of national development. And that's why we cannot joke with our practice. We need to go to the fundamentals of what makes us, why we are called a journalist. And for me, training and retraining is very key. I have 5 degrees, I will do 2 more before I'm 50. And by the grace of God, I will do many more before I'm even 60. So it's important for us to, in the newsroom, I would suggest, and my suggestion, and it's not important, as a political editor of channels, every election year, I will ensure that there's a form of training for everyone that is going to the field. Yeah. It's a refresher, it's a workshop, whatever name you call it, it's important. Because our goal is to inform the public. Once we mislead them, then we are undoing the public.
Many thanks. Thank you so much. Please pass the microphone to Mr. Sumner. Then we'll come to the Prof. So react to the questions raised, the issues raised so far.
All right. I think I would like to start by saying that we see how we partner more with NOIPolls and other polling organizations. Because it's very important we inculcate not only data, but actually try to see how we can bring lots of innovations that make us not, especially for journalists, not to think that we are this super set of guys that just alone, we do things alone and all of that. As things are changing, we need to continue to partner with others because the audience tastes are actually changing. The viewership ratings are changing. There are some people who don't watch news any longer. I hope you know.
Yeah.
And that's why
their mental health.
All these Gen Z guys, they just tell me we don't watch news. If I don't have TV in my house, Have you been listening to those kind of people?
Yes.
I only have my phone. I don't have TV in my house and all of that. And so we are going to birth the next generation, the next 2 to 3 generations that are going to get into serious troubles. Because once you get to your 40s, then you are actually faced with the realities of life. And by then, nobody will tell you to take news seriously. Because you have to take news seriously. I mean, for example, everybody is feeling the injuries right now in their pockets, right? All the holes in their pockets. But if you are the best time for you to be a Nigerian citizen now is for you to be like in your 15 to 20s or 25, when everybody's providing for you. Because once you get to 30 right now, I mean, it's not easy for us. 30, 35, 40, you will be feeling the pinch. So, organizations like NOIPolls help us to actually have the feelers as to what's happening on the streets and all of that. But I have one problem too that you guys are also having. Is on this issue of non-response bias. Now, it's a situation whereby there's a substantial number of people who, when you want to survey them, they just don't want to, they are not interested. They will not respond, they won't do anything, and so on. So when you now bring out the data, they'll not tell you, it's false now, how many people do and all of that. So this thing keeps happening. I mean, a whole lot of us went through higher institutions, and when you did your research and all of that, you give people surveys and all, they just dump them and all of that. So it's for us to actually imbibe that survey culture. Sometimes when things happen like this, people come across to you and they're doing their polling. It's very, very important. Like for example, I did something that had to do with the latest poverty statistics on my program on Saturday, and it was a huge war. So because of that, the two biggest political parties are fighting themselves, like ADC and APC. So on Thursday, there was this meeting of the Agora Policy Dialogue, which had to do with, where are we in terms of poverty figures in the country right now? We're at 49.8 before, and now we are 63%. And the ruling party says, no, the modalities for getting the statistics are wrong, this. The other one said, no, this and that. But the reality is that, whether I like it or not, if you were to do a polling, NOI, you will help us with an alternative view that will help to guide us to take a decision whether the political parties are saying the truth or not. And going into the election, it helps voters to be able to take, decisions, rational decisions, different away from what the political parties are telling them. And then, of course, it makes people to now solidify their choices in terms of candidates, and all of that, and then helping to focus on issues. Because sometimes as journalists, we're being distracted by these politicians. Every now and then they want to dominate the news as to this and that, and the real issues still remain. And what are the real issues? The reality right now is that people are actually facing serious economic challenges and all of that. And then some of the data sets that you actually produce, how can we as journalists make use of them in our newsrooms? I think maybe there should be some sort of partnership where when you do a new polling, you come and we give you airtime, you talk and all of that, and then we remove the issues of ethnicity. I'm sorry to say, during the last elections, when you brought out issues of Peter Obi, everybody just said, it's not and all of that. And before you know, they will color the narrative, and if you're not careful, you are not very strong in terms of the way you construct your decision. Immediately, everybody just say, yeah, that's the way it is. But should NOI, for example, I'm asking a very strong political question, should NOI polls now refuse to do his job because the owner is an Igbo, and maybe because the leading presidential candidate, in terms of statistics and facts, happens to come from the southeast? No, you'll be failing the society if you do that. You just do your job, and then you allow facts to speak for themselves. Now, that's what we do as journalists. We'll continue to do our jobs. In summary, what I want to say is that digital virality, it's important. I'm not saying that let's discountenance all the things that happen, people becoming like VDM and all of that and so on. These are the products of the sort of society that we're getting into. The sort of generation of people who don't want to listen to news, who don't want to listen to the traditional people, because they feel we are boring. But making money is boring, news is boring, but that is reality. That is reality. So, and some of these people, yeah, everybody wants to go digitally viral and all of that. in summary, if there is no trust, I'm saying a public trust, what is that trust? The fact that we push out news today, we can stand on it tomorrow, next tomorrow you come back again, we'll still tell you that this is the way it is, and that is the way it is. We won't color the news for you, we won't make you like the news whether you like it or not, but it's just that we can help bring more innovations that can help drive the newsroom, drive better conversations, get us a better country. And like some of the stuff that you did, I really use some of your, what's it called, information. In terms of the public trust in governance, for example, you did that some time ago. What are the level of people, how much do people trust the Nigerian government or those who are in power? I'm not saying whether it's Tinubu or, no, across all political parties. That information really helped to drive the newsroom. To say, look, if the number of those who are making policies for us, the trust is going down, then there's a problem. And then if it is going up, then maybe we need to encourage more people to do something good. So that's where public trust comes in.
Thank you so much. Please, could you kindly pass the microphone to Professor Adeniyi? Just give a summary of the issues raised and your opinion, just briefly, so that we can.
Well, yeah, I think it's been a very didactic session. Identified very clearly that we are in a different age, the age where facts is being obfuscated, by emotions, by sentiments, and of course there's constant collision. What do we do in this circumstance? We stick to facts, stick to evidence, so that when there is more information on the positive side, on the correct side, it will come in and tear through the emotions that is often witnessing a rush because it is often fast, it's often entertaining for the average person, to believe what is salacious, what is sensational, ignoring what appears to be the facts. And who are the purveyors, the armor bearers of those facts? The journalists, that is. And the charge, as it is that let the journalists continue to be these quintessential armor bearer. That responsibility should not be shirked because we have a society to build. Apart from this, there are institutions that they are building, and apart from the legacy that the individual practitioner is leaving for him or herself, as the case could be. Thank you.
All right, still hold on to that microphone because we're going to have the last line, and I would like to start with you. Just one sentence, in one sentence, what should the relationship between media and research organizations like NOIPolls look like in the next decade as we get into another election cycle?
The relationship is, I think the answer is very straightforward. Thank you, Georgina. It's one of partnership and collaboration. The research institution is like an engine room for information gathering, for the provision of insights, penetrating ideas on our essences that journalists, because it's under pressure of time, to release the news, may not have time to deal with. The onus is on the research institution to dig deeper, dig deep, bring out the information and feed it to the media to disseminate. And of course, if I'm to advise NOI, I beg your pardon, it's probably to see that we need to see more of their information, more of their outputs in the media, much more than they're doing now. They are doing excellently well, no doubt, but of course they can still up the ante and be an important counter, to what looks like, the problematic narrative of the official narrative that we're presently having. The cost is very good for them. They're coming on the back of a tremendous reputation of the forebearer, and they can leverage on that, to grow their reputation and make impact, not just in continental Africa, but in the world over as well.
Thank you. Please pass the mic to Seun Okinbaloye.
I think that what is important is we need to find out from you that the handshake has to be in such a way that maybe identify 2 or 3 people that you think understand how to communicate, how to, once your data set are ready, broken down in manners not more than 3, 4, 5 slides of the key information. You have 3, 4 people that people can easily call, arise, channels, anyone can call and say, we need this data, or we need an analyst to come and push this information. Then you have them to be able to speak. And I also like to ask, and I know it's very difficult to be able to get these data in, but my suggestion is that if most of your research and poll or reports come, it's seasonal and it's related to society issues, then it makes NOI a bit more, how do I put it now, a bit more relevant. Yeah, that's the word. So because if, for example, there is the Middle East crisis and you're telling us the data set on what it means for Nigeria, and we can see an average person can relate with it. Yeah. Everybody will be able to pass it on and deal with it. I think those are the thoughts that came to my head and how we can work together.
Many thanks, Mr. Sumner Sambo.
All right, thank you so much. My conclusion, in conclusion, my advice would be to us to actually stay glued to this stuff I want to say right now. As journalists, our fidelity is to the truth and to the public. Let's not break the trust that the public has in us at all. We're in the era of alternative truth, alternative facts, including by people that would never thought that would distort facts, but facts are very stubborn, right? We've heard so many people disturbing us. They say, sex the news, make it colorful, make it look very sweet. Look, news is very, very stubborn. If you sex the news and go and put the ingredients that are not meant to, it will disgrace you as a media house. So just stay stubborn to it. The same thing with NOIPolls. Please remain stubborn to the facts. Don't allow government to bully you or others. And then also, I'm very happy that you actually have been partnering with one of my very good polling agency, Afrobarometer. I've been following them very, very well. They're based in Ghana. They take polls on democracy, they take polls on governance. Do people, in fact, there's one of the polls that they talk that people prefer military rule in some of those countries than democratic rule, because military rule has paid them, especially in this like Mali, Niger, and all of that. Well, this is the reality, and if that's the situation, why are people running towards military rule and not democracy? Something must be wrong. There must be a disconnect. Our politicians are making democracy to actually lose relevance in this country. Yeah. As journalists, we must not continue to say democracy is the best form of government when we know that the ingredients of democracy are being whittled down. At the end of the day, people may be forced to take alternatives that you would never have ever dreamt that they would accept, like military rule. And we all know that many of the people in this generation, they've not witnessed military rule for them to want to say that military rule is the best alternative. Yes, they've never. So that's where the media must come in and provide the accuracy, the facts, and then with support from both staff like you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. This is a great place to conclude today's conversation. Remember, our conversation on credible data and responsible journalism are not competing forces. They're actually partners in shaping informed public discourse, and that's why I think we should applaud NOIPolls for becoming Nigeria's leading research organization for 2 decades. Thank you very much. In an era of viral noise, let's commit to wielding facts with integrity, bridging divides, and rebuilding trust, one verified story at a time. Thank you, my panel of discussants. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for engaging. I am Georgina Ndukwe-Ezeanyika.